Hi, I'm Michel Bayan, and welcome to the Source DS. Hey everybody, my guest today on the Source DS podcast is Kris Shenk, the CIO of CAbi Clothing. If you haven't heard of CAbi, you should definitely check them out. Very progressive, very interesting direct selling company, breaking a lot of the mold of what people thought you couldn't do if you were going to be in DS, and showing the world that you can do it and you can grow to a big company and continue to grow. And one of the ways they're doing so is in technology. Kriss has had a long history in working with a variety of different notable direct selling companies, building all kinds of systems. And she really shares a lot of wisdom around how she approaches that kind of stuff, and also getting into thinking about if you're a non-technical executive or a non-technical manager or director in a direct sales company, and you're trying to communicate with the technology side, what are some of the questions you should be asking? What are some of the things you should be looking for? Remember that if you're sales or marketing and you want a certain feature, it's important to make sure you get that feature, but the important thing your technology team needs to be doing is looking at a lot of other details, and there's ways for you to make sure that you're not just getting those features, but that they're going to integrate in with everything else you guys have going on. Really interesting conversation about automation, AI, and really customizing your communication, personalizing your communication for your field, and what can come out of all of that. So I think you guys will really enjoy this conversation. We share a wide range of topics, mostly around technology, but as you know these days, technology integrates into everything about how you do business. So no matter what part of a direct selling organization you're in, I think you'll find this conversation really interesting. So she's a real source of wisdom and progressive-minded technology leadership in this space. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with Kris Shenk. Okay, Kris Shenk, welcome to the Source DS podcast. Nice to have you.
Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure. We met several months ago, and I've just been so impressed by so many of the things you've worked on. I've been looking forward to this chat.
Good. I'm looking forward to it too. I think it'll be fun.
So first thing I want to talk about is I've had the pleasure of working with a few different technology leaders that are women in this space, although it's still a rare thing to find. And you've been around direct selling for some time and done a lot of different things for a lot of different companies. Talk to me a little bit about your journey. Where'd you get the bug? How did you start? Where'd you discover your inner nerd?
What a great opening question. My dad was a nerd, so I sort of grew up surrounded by nerds. So I think that's probably where it started. But one of my favorite stories is always from my early engineering days. I started out in engineering school when I went into college at University of Texas, Arlington. And I was one of 600 people in engineering class. And out of those 600 people, there were 2 women in this class. And so I remember feeling incredibly awkward. But then I quickly learned through my engineering classes that there's just a couple of things that you have to get over. And one is all eyes are on you as a woman in an engineering class for the first couple of days. They're looking at you to see if you're a threat and you can compete with everyone else in the room. And they're looking to see, 2, if you're smart enough, if you really have the chops. So once you can kind of establish yourself as being able to keep up, then the eyes sort of started to stop staring at you quite so much. And so that's kind of been my experience all the way along, is when you're a woman walking into a technical field, people will look at you more closely for the first 5 or 10 minutes to see if you really know what you're talking about. And once you've established yourself as able to do that, then it becomes easier from then on, and you're not having to prove yourself over and over again or any of that. But people just want to know that you really do know your technology and you can keep up. So it was always kind of interesting.
I think there's a little bit of that competition regardless of gender in the tech space. They want to know who you are, what you're up to, what you can really do.
Yeah, that's very true. So that probably has positioned me not to be so sensitive to that. Having been one or 2 women out of 600 men in a room, now I'm not so uncomfortable with that kind of scrutiny, regardless of where it comes from.
And how did this love for technology find you in the direct selling space? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, so early on in my career, I started with Time Warner Communications. I was working in broadband services and cable television engineering management, and I was obsessed with automation. And it just drove me crazy to watch how this big company had millions and millions of different processes and things going on in it that I knew I could automate. I had the software capability, I had hardware capability, I had everything at my fingertips with my team to be able to improve this company. But like a lot of large companies, they had that kind of IBM syndrome where you try to put something in motion and maybe 2 years later, you might see the fruits of that labor because it took that long to make a difference. So I left that Fortune 50 environment, went looking for somewhere, a smaller, much smaller company where I could really have an impact, where you could have an idea and then either a couple of days or a couple of weeks or even a couple of months later, you could actually see the fruition of that idea. And so I went to work as the CIO for a company called Hooked on Phonics, and they were a direct-to-consumer seller of children's educational products.
Oh, yeah, I remember those guys.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, that was all over the place. I guess I was a teenager at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. The thing about Hooked on Phonics was we had been hired as a part of a turnaround team to position the company for a sale. And when we got there, it was pretty much, I wouldn't say it was going under, but it was certainly floundering. And one of the biggest reasons why is they had no technology to help them support or run the business. And so we went in there and methodically started to put in that automation that I had been talking about, is trying to get them to a place where they could really run efficiently. And it was so amazingly fulfilling that you could actually see things happen and see things take place. So 5 years into that deal, they actually were positioned and very successfully sold the company. So having that direct to consumer experience sort of springboarded me into a consulting company called IMS. They did a lot of work with a lot of different direct selling companies. Now, while direct selling is a little bit different from direct marketing, it still had that flavor of direct to consumer. One of my first clients, too, was Cookie Lee. And so I'll never forget going to their annual convention and what an emotional experience that was, and to feel the power of this model as it was manifested at this convention. That hooked me and I never looked back. I mean, this was so much different, or so different from what I had experienced over the 12 years at Time Warner, and then even the direct to consumer with Hooked on Phonics. But this was a whole new animal. And
the original gig economy, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think apart in many ways, what people think of as the gig economy, which somehow doesn't include direct selling in many respects for some strange reason, the gig economy people haven't figured out what you just touched on, which was that sort of heart, life-changing personal development side of the direct selling channel, which somehow the gig economy side really still, I think I look at it as like a weakness for them. They haven't really tapped into that.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with person after person standing on stage saying how this business or this model or this product has changed their life so dramatically, and being employed in this business has really had such a positive and a profound impact on their life. It's really hard to not find that compelling.
Yeah, totally. And so from Cookie Lee.
Yeah, from Cookie Lee, with the consulting firm, I had the opportunity to work with a bunch of different direct selling companies, big, small, medium, startup, a whole range of companies. But I left Integrated Management Services, or IMS, to go be the CIO for Rodan and Fields. And that was a really great experience as well. This was early on when their technology they were basically being held hostage by their legacy system. It just couldn't really keep up with what they were trying to achieve, nor could it keep up with the growth that they were having as well. So I came in and helped them change out their systems and get them on a path for growth.
And that is no small feat, especially when a company has experienced the kind of growth that Rodan and Fields has experienced, to be able to go in there and really kind of almost from the ground up, right? Commission engines, back office, all that stuff.
Yeah, they were on a system that was kind of halfway there, but it was doing that half very badly. So we basically had to take the wheels off the car as it was speeding down the freeway at 90 miles an hour and change the tires. So we dissected the existing system piece by piece and then replaced that functionality with new systems. So it was a long and arduous journey, but it got them out of that hostage situation and allowed them to start to look at some of the more strategic growth objectives that they wanted to have.
That's always great, when a business like that can kind of get some of the tactical stuff handled to just give everybody the bandwidth to think about a little bit further down the field. That's just such a blessing and really allows a lot of possibility.
Yeah, it was really a great team to work with too. They knew exactly where they wanted to go. And that makes such a big difference for a technologist is, a lot of times people aren't really sure what's going to happen. And so they can't really articulate in such a detailed way what the business model intends to do in another 5 years, 10 years. But this was definitely different and was very clear, and it made the technology positioning much easier to do.
Yeah, I mean they're known for having some pretty advanced technology, and for I guess on that base, what they've built since then, I think, has also been really interesting to see and watch. I consider them to be one of the more tech savvy and progressive minded direct selling companies in the world, especially as it relates to the technology they do and what they're looking at and how they approach it. I had Lori Bush on the podcast about a year ago, and she shared some really interesting stuff with us.
Yeah, they definitely are. They've never been afraid of technology, which is, again, also a blessing for a technologist. So it certainly has allowed them to look at some more modern things that could keep up and really be productive for them.
Yeah, I mean, just in the conversations with Lori and the kind of metrics that they had and the way that they were looking at measuring certain things, there was very little assumption going on in that business. And you don't see that very much in direct selling. You see a lot of people doing a lot of stuff on gut and a lot of stuff on anecdote. They go out and they talk to 4 different field leaders and they think that they know what every field leader is experiencing and what every field leader needs. And, we don't take into account that, especially in direct selling, we have these massive fields of, really, really socioeconomically and culturally and linguistically diverse people that all have a different way of looking at your business and your product and what they want to get from it. And not understanding who those people are and what they want really kind of ties one hand behind our back from what you and I were talking about before we started this, which was just the idea of automation and of communication and how you can communicate with people effectively and meet them where they are instead of where you think they should be.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things the direct selling industry really can take advantage of. They have 3 really important aspects of what can make their technology more modern. And that's big data, or what I, loosely call big data. But the amount of information that we have within our fingertips as a direct selling company is incredible. Now you got to use it for something to really have it provide that value. A lot of people I know, they've got the data, but they have no idea what to do with this enormous asset.
Totally.
But if you take that asset and then you apply some concepts, again, my favorite obsession, automation, you put some automation with it, and then you think about how do you personalize that experience for your constituent? And when I say constituent, it could be your stylist, your consultant, your distributor, whatever you want to call that, or it could be the end customer.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's things you can do for both of them. So tying those 3 concepts together, that big data, that automation, and how you personalize the experience, I know some people kind of call that AI or artificial intelligence. And I'm always real careful within my organization not to use terminology like that because it's so vague. Not vague, but it's scary to them. And so they apply a definition to it that maybe isn't quite accurate. So I keep talking about our data, automation, and personalized experiences and tying those things together. But I can't get over how many great opportunities we have to get those 3 things tied together in a way that personalizes the experience to what the consumer wants or what the consultant wants. It doesn't take much to get out on the internet and go look at some of those personalized experiences that you can just see with an online retailer. or just online for that matter.
I mean, you probably don't even have to go that far, right? It's probably being done to you right now. I mean, I know it's being done to me. I mean, I've had airlines do it to me, Amazon, Netflix does it to me every night. You know what I mean? It's all around us already.
That's so true. And so that's one of the things I find so fascinating about the direct selling industry too, is it's all around us, but there hasn't been somebody who's really embraced it and taken that into the direct selling model. But there's so many different opportunities to do that with this personalization and advanced merchandising, even the concept of a recommendations engine for your product. I mean, that's been done for a million years, but direct selling's not really doing a good job of embracing that technology and what it can do for them.
I think it's one of those things that a lot of the mentality of a direct selling organization vis-a-vis not just technology, but we've always been known as this very capital efficient business model. And I think that a lot of executives and executive teams take this a little bit too much to heart these days. And, I hear this from a lot of executives that, there's not enough money in the pot to do a lot of the things that they want to do. And it's just about, spend the absolute minimum amount of money that you can to, keep the lights on and keep shipping product and keep paying commission and, keep your field from revolting and make everything else about how to get them to sell and recruit more. And there's just a lot more elements to running a sophisticated and modern business these days. And I think that, the companies that are making those kind of investments and aren't afraid to spend a few bucks on more automation and better technology and really understanding who their field is and why they want the things they want and who wants what versus the others, so that we can more effectively communicate with them and more effectively help them communicate with their customers, are seeing that pay back in spades.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. The other roadblock that I see and hear about is that direct selling companies use the positioning that we're not a technology company, we're a relationship company. And I hate to break it to you, you're both. And so one of the things that we've been doing at CAbi is trying to make sure that the technology never interferes with the relationship, but always supports the relationship. And I think that's important. And I think, to your point, I think there's lots of ways to make small investments that still nudge you towards that personalization and give you a little bit more without breaking the bank on a big black hole of engineering spend.
Big time. And I think that comes down to how you're hiring, right? And how you're thinking. I mean, I know you as a leader, you're a very careful planner, and you think about things in terms of stages rather than spend the whole giant wad of cash on one big massive program that nobody gets to see the results of for a year and a half. We'd much rather do something that is small and measurable and take more of a kind of maybe not even agile, maybe more lean style of approach to learn every step along the way rather than have some big massive plan. And so if I would say, you'd probably agree with me. And if not, let me know that, if a company is having their technology leadership telling them that everything they have to do is going to cost millions of dollars and take 18 months before anybody gets any answers, I would raise an eyebrow to that these days.
Absolutely. No question. That's one of the things we're very methodical about is when we have a big idea, you want to sort of look at that and break it into pieces and phase it in so that if this big idea flops, you haven't just invested $1 million in something that never got you where you wanted to go, but instead take that big idea, break it into pieces where you can test it and learn from what you found out. I think 9 times out of 10 as a technologist, you're going to deploy a great piece of software to the field, but something that you think's great or the home office thinks is great, but all of a sudden here's the field and they're looking at it going, well, I'm going to use it for this other thing. And they completely take it a different direction than you were expecting, or worse, they just don't use it.
Absolutely.
And so you have to be so careful about how you put these things out in bite-sized pieces so you can assess what's going to happen when you launch this.
And again, this is kind of happening all around us. I mean, if we look at mobile, and apps that we use that are some of our favorite apps, and look at just how many times these companies are updating their apps and, changing the way things work, most of the time improving them, not hitting the mark every single time.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, you open up an app and you're like, what happened? I just figured out how to do this, But most of the time, what they're doing is they're releasing features using their analytics and their data to track what people are using. And, they ask people what's more important to them, but more important than asking them what they will do is just watching what they actually do. And, then from there, they figure, oh, well, this is a feature that people thought they would like, but then they're not really using it. So let's put that one more on the bottom and move this one that they're always using up to the top. That the classic story of that is a company my buddy worked for, which was Groupon. Those guys had a whole other business model, and the Groupon thing was like a tiny little link in the corner of their website. But they realized that was what people wanted, and then it became Groupon.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's so true. We've always talked about implementing what we call feature of the month, and that way we can not only can we deploy these bite-sized pieces of functionality that the field wants, but we solicit the input from the field, so they're telling us what it is that they want. Kind of like the Groupon feature, the constituents, they know what's going to help them do their job. And sometimes the feature that they want is a tiny bite-sized feature, and other times it's $1 million feature. But if you could take 12 of these little bite-sized features that are going to make a big difference to them, they'll tell you that, and you can sequence those in and layer them. And sometimes when you look at that roadmap of these features, you can also sort of assess a broader view. Now, not only is it I'm implementing individual features, but the features create a system. And so we've kind of taken that approach so that you're looking at it from a systemic perspective so that all these little features glue together. And eventually at the end, now you've got your fully baked, complete system. And so from a technology standpoint, it's a great way to kind of compartmentalize, break it into pieces, implement, and your business loves it because the field is happy with that, but also they're happy with it because they're not spending millions of dollars on trying to build, the biggest and best system.
Yeah, I mean, you'll spend millions of dollars over time, but you'll get this, incremental, measurable improvement and proof of ROI every step of the way.
Right. You can measure every little feature that you implement to see, is it doing what I expected it to do? And if it's not, you can adjust the next feature. So you've got that opportunity to make course corrections along the way. And when you're done, the system that you've built is a much better, more robust system.
And so to clarify, we're all these ideas that we're talking about are not the current state of what we would see in direct selling today.
Yeah, I think there's companies that are sticking their toe in the water and kind of heading in that direction, but I haven't really seen anybody that's taken advantage of some of these things to the extent that I think they could be. For example, there's some people that are personalizing your interface as a consultant, and then some people who are doing a great job with mobile. But now, how do you tie those two things together? How do you tie the consultant back office to the mobile app? And how do those two things interrelate? What could you automate between those? The other thing I see people struggling with is the concept of communications methods. Email is so voluminous these days that how can you keep up? How can you keep up with everything that arrives in your inbox? And your consultants and your customers are in the same boat. So I've started to see people questioning what other communications methods should we have? Should we be able to text? Should we only do blog posts? Should we post on social media and not anywhere else? So everybody's trying to kind of figure that out. But I think if you layer on the personalization on top of that, you don't really have to figure it out. You have to let the consumer of the information tell you what it is they want. Give them the opportunity to say, only send that to me in my Twitter feed. I'll go click through to a link on a blog later and go get the full text. But just give me the quick hit, and then I'll go look at it. Don't send me a 6-page email with, all of this. So I think that's a really cool thing that's going to happen these days is people are going to start personalizing to that extent.
So I think you're bringing up a great point here, and this is super important. I think in the last few years, people have been thinking about the channel, right? This channel's full of messages, so we need to move to another channel that's not so full of messages. So let's send them SMSs instead. And that's full, so let's send them push notifications instead, right? And let's be on the channel that nobody else is on or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I get that, but it's people aren't, just because you're sending them an SMS doesn't mean you're one less message now. You're still another message you gotten. It's just a different channel. And so what we've been talking about here, automation, personalization, it really is the key, because you know what? I look at my email, I look at the subject line, I look at who sent it to me. I very rarely open them.
Right.
But if you're sending me a message that is important to me and it's something that's really resonating with me, I am going to open that email.
Yep.
And you'd be surprised at some of the emails that I open, And so some people just really nail it on the head, and some people miss it by a mile, right? And so I think the importance, going back again, is, the channel's important, but who is this person that you're sending a message to? What do they want? Mm-hmm. And how do you know that? And that's where we started getting into this idea of, data and automation. And so this is something that I know interests you a lot. And, we kind of went on a tangent after your RNF period, but I know you kind of did what you did at RNF kind of again with CAbi, right? Kind of building a whole new back office system and really getting that foundational element laid and beginning to introduce a lot of data and reporting into the organization. How's that journey been like for you?
Yeah, it's been very fulfilling, because I've been able to use all of the things that I've obsessed about and apply them at CAbi. They've been a great spot for not only testing and learning different things from a field perspective, but being able to gather data and look at it and decide what's the most important thing to do with this, to personalization. So they've really looked at all of these things kind of as opportunities, which has been really exciting. But I can tell you, when I first got there, their technology situation was very much like everybody else's on this selling planet. They were being held hostage to a legacy system that just hadn't kept up. It was a great system at the time, but the business had moved on, and the consultants had moved on. The customers had even moved on. They were in a new spot, and we're expecting new and different technology for that. So my team and I kind of entered CAbi and did our initial assessment, and that's really what it turned out to be. But we came in after an engineering team had already been in place building a system, that these guys were really, really smart engineers. They were very good engineers, and they had great ideas. The downside was that what they were building they weren't direct selling engineers. So they knew applications, they didn't know enterprise. They knew .com, but they didn't know DS. And so what they had built or started to build was a system that would have been great anywhere else, but wasn't going to do it for CAbi. And so we had to kind of dial it back and start over again to build up a platform that was enterprise level. And I can't emphasize enough how building an application is different from building an enterprise. It's just so night and day different that, it's hard to even articulate. But so that's what we kind of struggled with. So we tore down this application base and built an enterprise base. And from there, we were able to build this great platform that allows us to leverage all of these other things that we've just been talking about with the personalization and the data.
Let's talk about that real quick, though, the enterprise space, because, a lot of people that are listening to this might be in a company where they might feel a little bit frustrated with the state of technology. Imagine that. I'm sure maybe there's one person that feels that way. And a lot of times I speak to people and they feel the frustration. They don't really know, it's complicated, right? I mean, understanding the difference between if your team is just building an application or if they're building it for enterprise and you're like the VP of sales, it's like, that's not your job. Like, you're not supposed to know the difference, right? But there is some level of understanding and maybe some questions you can ask or some things you should be looking for that can give you an indicator that things are going the way they need to be. Can you share maybe a couple of ideas of, like, for someone that's not technical, how to know or what kind of questions to ask of the team along the way?
There's like a million. but to try and cull that down into something that,
Or maybe a theme, like looking for a theme. Yeah.
So I think the one thing that is probably easiest from a business perspective to understand would be the concept of that system. So in an application, it does one thing, has one output, and is very single focused. In an enterprise, it's all about connecting these modules together. So you're going to connect a front end website to an order processing module. Then you're going to connect that order processing module to your pick, pack, and ship module. Then you're going to connect the pick, pack, and ship to your commissions module. And so not only did the data you put in the front end interact with your customer and interact with your order processing system, but now it has downstream impacts to your warehouse, your finance system, your commissions engine. So it's really a chain of technology that all has to talk to each other. You can't just build one piece and in these unique silos. And that's what had been happening to us. We had a team of people before we got there that built a great front end. They built a great order processing engine, but they didn't even think about how that connected to the warehouse or to much less to commissions and genealogy.
Yeah, I was just talking to a company that they were building a website and they were like, way over budget, way over budget on this website, and they're almost done with it. And then they finally realized they were about to turn it on. They realized that you can't actually buy anything because it wasn't actually integrated into that part of the system, didn't get into the part where you can actually make a transaction. You can look at stuff and shop and do all this stuff, and then like connecting to the transaction part never happened.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation too. I've seen that happen a lot of times, and that speaks to good engineers, but don't understand the business model that they're trying to work with. So they might have engineered the most perfect and most brilliant front end in the whole world, but if it doesn't flow all the way through to the back end of the rest of the enterprise, then it's worthless.
Yeah, this is something I've learned from Jordan a lot, who my partner.
Mm-hmm.
Who has a lot of that kind of enterprise experience. And he's always talking to me about integration. It's like I'm talking to him about features and he's talking to me about integration.
Right.
And it took me a while to kind of like get the genius of that, because he's always like, look, man, I can build you whatever feature you want, but if this system doesn't talk to the other system, then how do you know? Like we've got to be able to get data out of something, understand what that data is all about, and then we've got to do our thing and then get data from our stuff out into who knows what other stuff and what languages that's dealing with and what kind of databases they have and all that kind of stuff. So do you think it'd be fair, like from a layman's perspective, to be looking for words that have to do with integration and into making sure that the conversation is not just about the features that you want, but how those features and functionality communicate with all the other stuff that's going on?
Yeah, I think that's a very good articulation of it. The other thing that you could do from a lay perspective is talk about stapling yourself to an order or stapling yourself to commissions. And what that means is following an order all the way through to the front end, all the way through to the back end where somebody gets paid, and seeing all the stops in between and the integrations that have to happen for that order on the front end to become commissionable volume, to flow through the system, to be picked, packed, and shipped, to flow to the finance system, to be booked in the GL as revenue, to flow into the commission system to pay a stylist or a consultant. So if you can
there you go.
successfully follow an order from start to finish, and even if you want to really get tricky, follow that order going the forward route. So that's taking the order all the way to the point that somebody's paid, but now reverse that as a return and follow a return order on that from hitting the door at the warehouse dock and flowing all the way through to a credit back to a customer, and decommissioning the volume if your company happens to do that. That's another way. So staple yourself to an order is another way to sort of check your integrations and make sure that those pieces, those integrated pieces, are all talking to each other.
Awesome. I mean, I would say if you're an executive, and this might actually be important if you're a startup or if you're looking at building a new feature and you're an executive and you're not technical, you should be, anyone that's building this or putting this together for you should be able to draw this out for you. They should at least be able to show you like a kind of a Gantt chart with all the different, like a box that represents each and every system and the flow of information from one system to the other.
Yep.
And if you're not seeing that, you should ask for that, because if they don't have it, you should at the very least raise an eyebrow.
Yeah, absolutely. They should be able to articulate that very clearly, because if they haven't built it, then they won't be able to, obviously, and that'd be a huge red flag.
And from a vendor perspective too, I mean, there's a lot of vendors with a lot of really interesting and compelling feature sets. And then, when you want to start integrating, you have challenges, or if you want to start getting data out of that system because you want to start doing your own analysis on the data that's being generated by your mobile app or the data that's being generated by your social media marketing engine or whatever, right? It could be so many things these days.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that's one of the things that the small to medium businesses always kind of get themselves into trouble over, is if they don't recognize that they are leaving one of their most important assets in the hands of a vendor, which probably is okay, but it's the most important asset that you have, arguably. So you want to own that. So I think one of the pieces of advice that I've always given to small and medium and large companies is that before anything launches, make sure that there's some method for you to get that data. Don't just let it sit with the vendor or in the vendor system. Make sure that you've got it at your fingertips and on site. Even if you're not going to do anything with it initially, just make sure you've got it. And then if you're a little more sophisticated or have the will or the energy, which I think is important, is have somebody who can look at it, analyze it, and decide what kind of business decisions can be made off of that. But
Definitely.
Owning it is definitely the first step. And any vendor that tells you that you don't own your data, run.
Agreed. Yeah, you've got to be able to get access to it and own that data and be able to do whatever you want to do with it. I mean, it might not necessarily be delivered to you in a format where you could run like machine learning or something like that against it. You might need a data warehouse or a data mart or something like that first, but at least you've got access to it, and then you can do magic with it and massage it this way or that.
Just start with having it. Make sure you've got it.
Because then the possibility is there. And so if you're an executive in a smaller or a medium company, you're really working on growing, and you're a vision-based executive, and you got a lot of dreams, and you got a lot of ideas of features that you want to build and all that, that's awesome. A lot of those things are differentiators for young companies. But just make sure you've got the technical people behind you that are supporting you along the way and thinking about how everything is talking to everything else for you. And make sure that you feel confident in that and you don't get kind of too stuck in the dream of all these amazing features that you want. And the only thing you're doing to vet if it's being done right is looking at the feature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they definitely, if they don't have technical people to back them up, and I think that's probably the best advice of all, is make sure that you've got a qualified technical person that's supporting you that can give you the advice that you trust. If you, in the absence of that, you really have to do your due diligence, and you'll have to do it yourself, and you'll have to ask the questions that, maybe you're not comfortable asking, but ask them anyway. And, always go get a second opinion too. I mean, there's so many people running around the industry right now that know this stuff. There's always an opportunity to find an advisor that can help them with sort of vetting some of the stuff and making sure that you understand it.
Yeah, and I think that, we're moving into an age now in direct selling where things are becoming a bit more transparent, where it's easier to, know who the vendors are that exist, where it's easier to, I'll do a little bit of shameless self-promotion with the Source DS. That was the whole reason why we created it, was because we realized there was no way to even know who the vendors were and to get a list of all of them. And then imagine the idea of being able to see someone who's worked with them in the past and what their experience was like. And these are all really important things that exist everywhere. And I understand that in the beginning, transparency can be a little bit kind of scary, but, the benefits, far outweigh the costs in the very near term. You just got to kind of dunk your toe in the water, and then pretty quickly you figure it out.
Well, I think the power of ratings and reviews is one of the greatest things that's happening these days to consumers. And whether it's consumers of shoes or clothes or software, To get an assembly of people together that are telling you what they like and don't like about that particular software. I mean, that's invaluable.
And even if you get negative reviews, I mean, I remember picking a roofer, for example, on Yelp. And like one of the reasons why I picked the guy wasn't because of his good reviews. It was because of how he responded to his bad reviews.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In this day and age, nobody expects you to be perfect. They just expect you to take responsibility for your mistakes and not make the same mistake twice.
Yeah. And who knows, the bad review may be related to something that is irrelevant to what you're doing anyway. So yeah, I very rarely will rule somebody completely out because of bad reviews, except for customer service bad reviews. Those are the kiss of death.
Yeah, it's so funny how some companies are really getting it right. And some companies, that's the thing, is that more and more companies are getting it right these days, whether it's around data, customer service, personalized communication, automation. That what's happening is that when you start to see the companies that aren't doing it, it starts to hurt more.
Right.
When you're experiencing them. It's like when you first went from dial-up to broadband and then you go over your friend's house and they're still on dial-up, you're like, oh my God, I can't even do it. I just can't even do it. And it's the same thing now. It's like if you're not that company that's like up at that level, the people who are experiencing you, they're not experiencing you like they were before. You're now dial-up and they've tasted broadband.
Yeah, and that's where direct selling companies are going to get in trouble too, as these millennials and Gen X, Gen Y all start coming into the workforce and start looking at direct selling as a viable employment opportunity. The lack of technology is going to be a glaring differentiator. That's going to be tough. So companies are going to have to keep up with technology to be able to attract that segment of the population.
I mean, Uber is a great example. They really nailed the technology, especially in the early days. And what they did with that was it enabled them to recruit a tremendous amount of people. I mean, they had 1 million drivers 2 years ago.
Yep.
And all of that happening without even anybody really physically recruiting them. They didn't have an upline or anybody like that to tell them how amazing it was or anything. All they had was the experience of being an Uber passenger and the promise of how much money you can make. And that promise of how much money you can make is nowhere near the potential of what you can do with many direct selling businesses. And yet they still managed to recruit 1 million people. So there's got to be something for us to learn there, right? There's got to be something in there.
Well, definitely. The technology out there today is all about connecting a need with the people who are going to deliver on that need. And Uber's a great example. Airbnb, VRBO, all of those companies who they don't actually own any assets. Like Uber doesn't own cars, Airbnb doesn't own real estate, but yet they've found the magic in the data and the personalization to be able to tie this person who needs something with the company that's going to deliver that. And
the customer experience. I mean, I just got back from a month in Bali and we used Airbnb in almost every one of our stays there. And it is so incredible to be able to communicate with the place that you're going to and ask them questions and see what they've got and see what other things they have to offer you so that, before you even get there, like if you book a hotel and you have a question about the hotel, good luck calling that hotel and getting an answer to anything. Mm-hmm. You're going to get some call center somewhere and you're going to get rerouted to this and rerouted to that. And the person you talk to is probably not going to be the person you meet when you check in.
Right.
It was incredible. I mean, we're Airbnb hosts ourselves. And so we hadn't really thought about it because we'd been on the hosting side and that's just kind of what we do. We have a few different properties, but when we were actually guests is when we really realized, wow, no wonder we're full all the time.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. Very, very interesting stuff.
So obviously, automation, big data, this is a big topic. And I want to move into this idea of technological unemployment because I know it's something that is a subject that's really interesting to both of us. Let me just kind of set it up for people that don't know what it is. So we're talking about this phenomenon of automation. And, during the Industrial Revolution, there was a fear of this, right? Where machines and automation started to, automate out a lot of the jobs. The thing that happened, though, was that automation also created a whole bunch of new jobs in the information sector, mostly, and, people working information-related jobs. And so people would train up and they'd get a job. But nowadays, we're seeing a trend where automation is happening so efficiently that it is just now beginning to actually create fewer jobs than it is destroying. And some people are looking at that on a 10 to 20 year horizon and saying, well, what's going to happen with unemployment when we have, robots making not just most of the car, but all of the car, and robots driving the car with self-driving car and self-driving trucks, and, call centers where you won't even be able to tell the difference if you're talking to a person or a machine. Talk to us a little bit, Kriss, about this idea of technological unemployment and how you look at this challenge.
Good question. There's a couple of things. So I think as much as we've been talking about this concept of that and the evolving of automation and how that's deteriorating some jobs but creating others, from a technology standpoint, there's this increasing need for people who understand data. And I think that's not something that's going to go away. And, obviously the guy riveting the car together, you can tell I'm not a car person. I don't know what they do on the line, but putting that car together is not necessarily going to be the guy that can now help analyze the data. But I think there's more and more opportunities for technology people as that arena starts to unfold. There's going to be people who need to know how to collect that data because it's going to be volumes of data. We think we've got big data now. We'll just wait. When you start to look at all the personalization and what the data drives as a result of that. So now you've got to house that. You've got to maintain that. You've got to be able to keep it safe and protect it. So you've got all those tactical things with regards to the data, which will create jobs. But then you've got this whole realm of, now what do you do with it now that you got it? We've got volumes and volumes of data, but unless it's going to tell you something valuable to drive your business forward, that's what good is it? So you've got to have people that are competent and capable to analyze what is coming out of all of that.
And we're already short on that kind of talent now.
Oh, completely. I mean, we're having a horrible time finding people who, are really good at that particular thing. There's such a nuance to it. So I think that's going to obviously grow within the industries. And then on the other side, which is a little more self-promoting, I guess, for the direct selling industry, there was I think it was a Forbes magazine article that said by the year 2020, 40%, and even some articles say 50%, but 40% of people are going to be looking for an entrepreneurial venture outside of their corporate job or in the absence of a corporate job. And I thought that was an astounding statistic. Mm-hmm. So when you look at those numbers and you look at the direct selling industry for a compelling product, there's your entrepreneurial venture, or there's an opportunity for an entrepreneurial venture. So, these people could also sort of move their ways into direct selling.
Oh, big time. There's so much opportunity there, I mean, we've got what you're talking about, which is this trend that we're already seeing that's very clear of people wanting to move into an opportunity that is a lot more flexible in terms of time and freedom. And then you compound that with this idea of technological unemployment. What I'd like to get your thoughts on is the way I think about it, which is, people are inevitably going to lose jobs. A certain portion of those people will be willing and able to train up. But if we're losing them at the pace that some people are projecting, which is, by the millions and millions, there's going to be a good percentage of those people who just are either unwilling or unable to train up.
Right.
And if we can put ourselves in a position as a direct selling channel to offer an opportunity to those people, what we're doing is we're not only offering them as an individual an opportunity to continue to generate income for themselves, but what we're doing is as the economy starts to strain with this unemployment, the problem when we have all this amazing automation, which lowers the prices of goods and services dramatically, if your car is self-driving, labor is the most expensive part of a taxi. So the price of a taxi could go down 80%, and if the price of a taxi is down 80%, like, why do you want to own a car anymore? Right? So we can go on and on and on with this to forever. But the point of it is that when we have less and less people, quote unquote, employed, we have to figure out a way to keep money moving through the system. And direct selling is a really great kind of decentralized way of keeping goods and services moving through communities and without any kind of central retail store or anything like that. And if we can think about that problem, this is the conversation I'm trying to initiate that I was telling you about earlier. I'm going to be putting some executives together to talk about how can direct selling position itself as part of this solution for this kind of looking into this future.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at that statistic, the 40%, there it is. With people trying more and more to be in that entrepreneurial area, I think that they've already made the recognition that that kind of position is going to be more appropriate to their lifestyle than ever before in numbers that are, I'm pretty staggered by that statistic, but it just means that direct selling is positioned to take on some of that if they do it right.
Exactly. And I think that comes back to everything we were saying, right? It comes back to, can they get the data? Can they analyze it right? Can they deliver the right personalized level of communication?
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't want to naively say that the guy building a car at the General Motors plant's now going to, suddenly sell nutritional supplements. But I think there's sort of a slide or a trickle effect that, may be able to happen from something like that.
I think if we, and this is a bit, kind of dream building here, but I think if direct selling positions itself right, it can have a lot more market share and a lot more things can be sold direct. Mm-hmm. So, who's to say that the guy building cars can't be the local source for auto parts,
right?
Or, something like that.
Yeah, there's certainly that kind of opportunity. I don't think we've seen the last of the creative and inventive product in the direct selling model. And I think a lot of companies have kind of changed the traditional paradigm a little bit. And I think CAbi's kind of one that has done that, is kind of looking at direct selling a little bit differently. And so now, if you can get out of what you traditionally think of the direct selling business and sort of open up your mind to slightly different models, that also opens up the opportunity for slightly different products, like maybe the auto parts guy. And I think that could very well be something that happens.
Yeah, I mean, CAbi has definitely blazed a new path in terms of what it means to be a direct selling company, what it means to recruit people and who gets to come in and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you guys have done a really interesting job and really proven that you can grow to be a big company and you don't have to do it the way everybody's always said you could do it.
Yeah, CAbi's definitely broken the mold on that. And their growth has been very steady from inception to today, and it's expected to continue on. But it's been very methodical and not had this hockey stick growth that a lot of people have had. And then, you kind of hit that 7 to 10 year mark, and now all of a sudden that hockey stick growth starts to flatten out. We've just never experienced any of that negative association with that super hyper growth. So it's always been very steady, very methodical growth and very consistent year over year. And, we're in our 15-year anniversary this year. So everybody's very excited about that.
That's awesome.
And the success is, just continues to move forward.
Yeah, the more and more I learn about you guys and your business and what you're doing and how you're thinking about things, is just, it's so incredible. You guys are really setting a great example of what's possible and how, you can really kind of blaze your own path. And if you're conscious along the way and you're measuring your results, like we were always saying, you can keep adjusting and find a new way that might be better than the way we've always done it,
Yeah, and we've been very, very blessed with visionary people from the inception of CAbi who not only were the visionaries, but also the keepers of the culture. And they've made sure that what the original premise of the company was 15 years ago has really held through to today and gets carried on in the future. And I think even though technology has been maneuvering all around that, they've kept very tight to that original culture commitment and culture promise. And I think that's served us very well. And we've got a great leadership team, and our marketing team is great. Our executive management is great. Everybody embraces technology in a way that is thoughtful, where, maybe I'd go running in going, we have to do this. They're a little more thoughtful about how that's going to impact the field. And again, the relationship comes first and the technology is supporting role, even though my exuberance might say something different. but they're always really good about identifying how that should work and making sure the stylists are supported in the best way possible.
And it shows. I mean, you guys have your stylists are extremely successful. They do very well. It's quite inspiring to see that. And I think, it's very easy for people that want to start a direct selling company to get seduced by the kind of traditional old school kind of churn and burn model. But, I think it's been proven at this point that there are other ways to do it where that's better for the people involved, that, you don't have to settle for 3% of everybody that comes in making money and everybody else just kind of like falling off.
Right.
There's ways to do it that are better for the people and better for you. And if you have just a tiny iota of patience, will make you way more money in the long run and cause you way less like FTC type problems and headaches that you would have to deal with, way less drama, all that kind of stuff for just like a teaspoon of patience,
Yeah, I think that is definitely one of the important parts is you're trading off that exponential growth for that slow and methodical growth that'll happen over a number of years, and that does take patience.
And you can still get the growth. I mean, again, like who knows? That's one of the things we're focused on is with Jordan is where it's all about this data, and I think the data can really uncover who these people really are, how we really need to communicate with them, so we can be so much more efficient about who we recruit, why we recruit them, how we communicate to them, what we try to motivate them towards, and as a result, see more of them be successful. So that you can still recruit a good number of people and see varying levels of success that are depending on what's appropriate for the person in question.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's so true. It's customized experience for them as well.
Ta-da! So moving on, this has been a great discussion, but it's already been an hour, believe it or not. So I want to get into the getting to know you part of this, which is one of my favorite questionnaires. Where the only part of my interviews where I ask everybody pretty much the same questions.
Uh-oh.
Especially in direct selling, Kriss, we see a lot of executives kind of burning the candle on both ends. And, work-life balance, we talk a lot to our field about achieving that. And then, our executives are kind of like working 20 hours a day and running around. How do you approach your balance between your work and your personal life and making sure that you're taking care of yourself?
That's a good question. I think everybody has their own tolerance level for what they, what is too much and what's too little. But I think, one of the things that sort of drives me forward is, first off, I'm a geek. I'm a total technologist. So I live and breathe this anyway. So by default, I'm constantly engaged in, ooh, what could this do for the company? Or, ooh, hey, let's think about that. Or, ooh, no, we don't, we do not want to do that. So it's kind of a constant soundtrack to my life, really. The other thing, too, though, is you go to, now we just came off of our 6-month season launch convention in San Diego. And it's like I was saying before, you go to convention and you hear the stories of how the company has changed people's lives. And so it's hard not to get up every morning going, I can have an impact. I can do something positive to help someone today. And so that work-life balance issue sort of becomes secondary. Now I have the benefit of a family support system that allows me to do that in a way that I know not everybody can, but I guess I'm very fortunate in that respect. The other thing too that kind of is fresh in my head that came out of our sessions at CAbi is that they've got an entrepreneur program such that every new recruit that comes into the business, they will make a micro loan for a woman trying to break out of the cycle of poverty in a third world country. And they attach these two people together. And so they both start their new businesses together. They evolve together. And through the power of technology, they keep track of each other and help support each other. And so that's a really powerful thing, too, is when you start seeing not only am I helping our stylists have the life that they've always dreamed of, but I'm potentially helping the world at large and women in the world at large to have a better life and a better life for their families. It's really hard not to spend all of your waking time not thinking about it. But that's just me. So I certainly can't advocate that sort of thing to everyone in this universe.
Well, I mean, some people know that, and I see this a lot with technologists that, that's what they've always wanted to do. It's like, it's what you live and breathe for. And like, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, that's so true. That is very, very true.
So if you could place an ad on the internet that everyone that goes online tomorrow will see, what would that ad say, or what would it do?
This is one of those questions you didn't give me in advance to think about. We'll have a conversation about this later. I'm just kidding. That's a really good question. I don't know. There's so many different aspects that you could come at this from, but I need my marketing person sitting next to me to help me, craft a really good message. But maybe something that would advance the message of direct selling. And I don't know how, but something that maybe starts to reduce the stigma of old that prevents people from thinking about direct selling as a viable option. And I think as we go on and on, as time goes on, like the millennials and the Gen X and Gen Y, they have less of that preconceived idea about how direct selling can be a viable employment opportunity. But I think there's still enough people out there that, maybe need to overcome that stigma. And so that would be a good one.
Agreed. I mean, PR is definitely probably the biggest issue the industry has as a whole.
Or maybe, let me change my answer. I would actually have an ad for all the private equity firms and the angel investors to invest in more technology for direct selling. There you go.
Good one.
That would be my ad.
Good one. I like that one.
More money.
I'll go in with you on that one.
Okay. All right. There you go.
I can be the marketing guy for you. I'll write the copy.
Yeah, that's what I need. That's what I need. I need some marketing help.
So the last one is, if you could go back to any time in your life and meet yourself back then and share a piece of advice with yourself, when would you go back to, and what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, that's kind of easy. I would go back to my Fortune 50 days and say, get out now. Don't do this anymore. You're not happy. Go do something that makes you happy. And that something for me just happened to be where I had the most impact on an industry and could see the results of what I was trying to accomplish and actually help move a company forward. So I'd go back to the younger me and say, get into direct selling technology sooner.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Kriss, thank you so much. I mean, it's been such a great conversation. There's so many gold nuggets full of this last hour or so, and I'm sure people are going to love listening to this and want to share away. There's so many great nuggets from just your years of experience working with so many different direct selling companies and really making a difference for these companies, really getting them to where they needed to be from a technology perspective, which is not always easy and absolutely rare. So thank you so much, Kriss. It's been a real pleasure having you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here. It's been a joy to sit here and chat with you. So looking forward to the next time.
Hopefully soon.